Hi everyone and welcome to the Spencer Lodge podcast in partnership with Najahi Events. Imagine chopping your fingers off due to the pain of frostbite. Or even better, how about climbing to the top of Everest when you suffer from vertigo? Or even still, doing 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents. Today's guest, the epic and incredible Sir Ranulph Fiennes. His recent book, Fear, dealt with an issue that I struggled with as a kid, which is bullying. And if you suffered from bullying, you want to listen up to what Ranulph has got to say about how bullying affected him as a kid and how he used it as a force for good. Wow. Sir Ranulph Fiennes, thank you so much for coming onto my podcast and sparing some time while you're here in Dubai. I genuinely really appreciate you doing that.
No, well, thank you very much. I feel honoured that you should ask me, so thank you.
You've been literally blowing our mind over all these years with your crazy adventures, stuff that really has got people sitting thinking, what on earth made him think of that? And then you've been threatened along the way by the Norwegians, always trying to catch you out and trying to beat these adventures before you get them. Is that happened kind of like recurringly, or is it said a little bit in jest about the Norwegians?
Well, you know, we didn't, when we started doing polar stuff, know that the Norwegians, it was their particular niche, and that they were DNA-wise extremely good at doing it for quite a long time. We didn't really know that, but then back in the 70s, when the thing was to get as far as you could from land towards the North Pole without support by air or anything else like that, and gradually it was increasing as different people did it. I was with South African Charlie Burton we had just actually broken the existing world record towards the pole, and the radio operator, my late wife, sent a message. The bloke I was with, Charlie Burton, bless his soul, he's dead, was a little bit crude, and he couldn't pronounce the name of the main Norwegian top polar man at the time, whose name was Ragnar Schorthketh. And Charlie couldn't pronounce it, said we'll call him Forskin. And somehow or other this had got out. And this newspaper, which was read out by my wife, was the Bergens Tidende, the big Norwegian West Coast paper. And in it said, yesterday the Brits, Fiennes and Burton, beat the existing world record towards the pole, but our people under Ragnar are catching them up. And it then added, and this message came in Morse code from my wife, so you can imagine us receiving it, reading out the paper that she had, and it said, anyway, the Brits have taken a prostitute with them on their sledge, which is total invention. And there was, in those days, a newspaper in the UK called News of the World.
Yeah.
And it elaborated the Norwegian stuff and made it sound really, really bad. And we lost our 2 main British sponsors. So I think that was when the enmity crept in.
Goodness me. I think and listened to your books. But how many books have you written now?
26.
Do you enjoy the whole process of writing?
Nobody pays you for doing the expeditions, so we've learnt, and Chris Bonington would agree, that the only way is you either lecture or write books or try and do both. And if you haven't done an expedition, then you're going to have to write a book about something else. And recently I've done one on fear, by finding people that have experienced 16 different types of real fear. And for instance, one of them, I really was amazed. This student from Essex, 22 years old, went as a medical student to Sierra Leone, and suddenly a thing called Ebola cropped up, and his nurse friends all around him were dropping in a horrible way, you know, dead. And he just stayed with it, and the fear grew and grew, you know, and he found that they started having proper suits.
The hazmat type things.
But proper suits all over their bodies, the doctors and the medical students. But it got so hot out there with no air conditioning that they had to wipe out the sweat and all the rest of it. And any little invasion they didn't know about could, next day, the worms start and so on. And I couldn't believe, I would not have lasted like he did. And later in the UK newspapers, he was RAF'd back with Ebola in great cocoon stuff. And for some reason, he was one of the tiny percent that survived. And then when all the newspapers were full of that Scottish nurse who came back, she survived because of his blood. I mean, transferred.
As an antidote, as an antidote to the...
And that, I just thought, what a brave bloke. He is still alive now, yeah.
That is something quite... it's really interesting you say that, because do you know Ant Middleton? He wrote a book called The Fear Bubble recently, and now he was Special Boat Services in the military. And then in 2017, he climbed Everest. And he'd been in Afghanistan and Iraq and the various things that he'd done in the military over the years. And he learnt to try and understand how he compartmentalized fear in his life. And so, a simple example, if you're going for a skydive for the first time, you turn up at the skydive center and most people are rather worried.
Yeah.
They put the harness on, they're now getting scared, and they walk out to the airplane, they're very scared. On the plane, they're scared. But the only real danger comes when you jump out of the plane.
Right, that's
and
true.
So he was trying to get people to understand that there actually is no fear. There should be no fear where there is no danger. And because your adrenaline is pumping when you're scared, if you learn how to manage when you literally step into fear, as in step into the danger, then you can make sure that the adrenaline pumps at that time and deal with it then and understand. So when he was minesweeping in Afghanistan and stuff, again, it's like, where's the actual danger? And he really thought hard about everything he was doing, about where the actual danger was, and it helped him calm, and deal with that fear. And so when I was listening to your book on fear and the different people that experience different fear, you talk about bullying.
Bullying.
And when you were a child, some things that happened to you, and those two guys, I forget their names.
But now, of course, as I said in the book, it's much worse because of the
cyberbullying and
what do you call it? Web,
internet, yeah, much worse. I mean, I didn't have the web when I was a kid, like you didn't.
No.
And when you think about that fear that goes around bullying, and you tell the story that you have around that, it takes me back to a place where I was bullied quite badly at school. But that bullying created this overwhelming desire to want to prove the bullies wrong at some point in my life. So all I wanted to do, and still to this day, there's an element of me that's like, I'll show you. And
I see.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
And so there were those two guys, the two lads that were in the kind of close to you when you were younger, and there were some bullies, and they changed sides, and they went, do you remember this? And they went, and I forget their names, but you said you hated their guts because of what they did.
When I was very little?
Yeah, when you were little, yeah.
I almost, on the tip of my tongue, got the memory of the name of one of them. It was a sort of Jewish-sounding name, actually.
Okay.
But
do you remember what they did?
They used to beat you with bamboo sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember that. What was it, Guzman or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And many, many years later, I wrote a book and talked about it. And someone had sent him a copy of the book. And I got a letter back saying that he had never bullied me.
Really?
Yeah.
No way. There's somebody that communicated with me on social media that I accused of bullying me when I was young.
And they said they didn't.
And they said, no, that didn't take place.
Whether he genuinely had forgotten that he was like that or not, I don't know. Or whether he knew perfectly well and he was just denying it.
Yeah, maybe. Now, you were bitten by a spider when you were down in South Africa when you were younger.
Yeah,
and then
in my pajamas, yeah.
Yeah, down the back of your pajamas, which is kind of well documented. But I find it really interesting learning about when you were in Oman, when the wolf spider was on your...
Well, there were wolf spiders and camel spiders, and they're both 7 inches across with eyes and mandibles and all that, yeah.
And you sat there and you had to kind of like grin and bear it and not show you were scared?
Yeah, that's in that fear book, is it?
Yeah, the fear book,
right,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, the spider thing was forced confrontation.
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to confront it, but I did want to join the Omani army. And as it turned out, which I didn't expect, there were these dreadful, huge, spiders. And I was still by then frightened of little English spiders, never mind dirty great things like that. But slowly but surely you learnt they weren't biting you and they're in your sleeping bag and all that before so over 2 years, I lost the fear completely of spiders.
That was subconscious, not conscious. That just kind of happened because of your...
Well, the first horrific time when one crawled across me and we're sitting around the fire with all these guys who were looking at me to see what I'd be like as a new boss. And I knew that they couldn't care a damn about these big spiders. But I also know that if I could have reacted the way I normally would if they weren't there, I would have literally screamed and crushed the damn thing. So the fear of losing the respect of all these guys was greater than the fear of this long-standing arachnophobia.
Isn't that interesting how there's one fear that could become bigger than an almighty fear, which was your fear of spiders?
Yeah.
The fear, it's almost like saving face or embarrassing yourself.
Yeah, it's rational thought.
Yeah.
If you're thinking, I'm going to lose their respect, you're thinking ahead of the sheer fear factor.
Mm-hmm. I find that really interesting when you relate it to the commercial world and business, and about entrepreneurs trying to become successful in their careers or building businesses, and inherent fears they have that you got bitten by a spider, so I can understand where that fear came from. But people have fears of failure, or they have a fear of making a decision, so they become paralyzed, paralysis from analysis almost. And I find it's fascinating in the world of business how fear plays such a massive role, and that's why I was so interested in your book, because I think that a lot of it translates into everyday commercial activities and business life for many people, but they don't see it that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been into commerce sort of thing, but I can understand that they would be frightened of spending money on it to make it big, mm-hmm. and then end up with debts. And that is a frightening situation for anybody. Mm-hmm. Mm.
Some people even fear, some people get riddled with fear of the thought of having to go and, network with a group of people in a room because of the fear of what other people might think of them.
Oh yeah, I've never entered into that sort of field.
But it's really interesting.
The worst of all was one which the police stopped me writing in it. Bristol. Uh-huh. People in my office on Exmoor said that there was this woman who would be very good for that particular book interview, lived in Bristol. And so eventually I got on to the woman, and she said, she'd speak to me about her fear. And it had happened 4 years earlier when her husband had died. He was also like her, about 40 at the time. But she survived, and they were very happily married because they had a 14-year-old daughter who lived with her in Bristol in this flat. And one morning she hadn't heard the daughter going out for school. So she'd gone down to wake her up sort of thing, and found she was hanged by her school tie on the knob of the door. If you can imagine that, her one thing in life, very happy married mum and daughter relationship. And so why had she done that? And it was cyberbullying. So she told me all about cyberbullying, and it was a wonderful chapter, if I say so myself, of fear. And then about a week before you close correction of the print, your last chance to change the text.
Editing. Yeah.
Just in time, the same people in my office rang up and said, "Hey, you can't use that whole chapter because the trolls, are they called, mm-hmm. are now making such a big thing that they're saying that all the cyberbullying was secretly by her own mum." That, I know that was rubbish. I met this woman. I could see, right in there, no way, Jose. But the police had to react in such a way that they had to not have any publicity until they looked into it and all that, including the book. So I wasn't able to do that one.
But that makes me so angry, that does. When you tell the story about the pianist that was in the boxing class, And so he was abused by his boxing coach, and how he became then a celebrated pianist. But the struggles that he had through his life, I have an awful lot of empathy when I feel what he must have been going through. And where do you find those types of stories?
Yeah, I'd never done a book where I was interviewing people before. So I asked various friends in the publishing world how you set about finding them. And they came up with about 46 suggestions. And some of them got into the book.
That's basically what happened. Well, when you were hearing those stories, though, when people were telling you them...
it was fascinating. I'd never done it before. I'd never done it since. But it was a very interesting thing to be involved with, yeah.
Incredible. Now, from last count, correct me if this number's wrong or not, £17 million you've raised?
18.9.
18.9 million pounds you've raised for charity.
And got stuck on it. So it's become a stupid... Obsession to get 20. I like the figure 20 million.
What can you do to get it?
Well, we're plotting various things.
Which you can't talk about.
If they become feasible, then we can go to the normal charities and saying, we'll raise money for you.
So you've got, how many projects in the works at the moment?
Well, it could be all three won't come to anything. One's in British Columbia and two of them are in different parts of the Arctic.
When you consider you did the Marathon des Sables, you did, was it 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents?
Yeah, the Marathon des Sables was for a charity, and that was my thinking. The other thing, that 7th thing, was totally Mike Stroud.
Yeah, he said.
I couldn't say no because, it's him. But I didn't like the idea because I'm not into marathons at that time. So
you weren't into running long distances?
No.
How old were you when you did the Marathon des Sables?
I think 73.
There's got to be the oldest person doing it, yeah?
No, there were French people older than me. I'm sure.
Really?
Whether they finished or not, I don't know, but they certainly started.
I've had friends that do it. I've got a friend of mine who's got Parkinson's and he does it. And he just...
How long has he had Parkinson's for?
Since he was 32.
And he's now...
Alex Flynn is his name. Alex is a year younger than me, so he's 48.
So Parkinson's takes a long time to become bad.
He uses the adventures as a way to cope with the Parkinson's.
He doesn't use cannabis?
No, he doesn't, no. But
because
I know
the latest cure for Parkinson's apparently is...
cannabis oil, isn't it? Or something?
Yeah, that you drop on your tongue.
Yeah.
It's plant-based.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I've heard anyway.
Yeah. I've heard the same.
And I've heard of people who put it off 20 years by doing that.
I've seen some videos on YouTube where there's people that have been, extremely the shakes.
That's right.
And they've given them the medication and it's calmed them down. So there's definitely
was that the cannabis medication or not?
Yeah, I think it was the cannabis.
Right.
It was called THP. Was it THP? I can't remember the initials. There's 3 initials, but it's cannabis-based oil that.
Well, I started the tremors about 6 months ago. And so I went to a doctor eventually about a month ago and got put in a sort of tube, whatever you call those MRI.
MRI machines, yeah.
And they look at your brain and all that. And then you get a report afterwards which said, well, we can't be sure that the tremors can happen for all sorts of minor things as well. So we don't know. But if it is the first signs way back, you can now, we know, use cannabis drops. Mm-hmm. Either strong, medium, or low. Mm-hmm. What would you like to do? So I thought medium sounds reasonable. I haven't started, but
you haven't.
No, but I will do. Yeah.
When are you going to give it a go?
Sorry.
When are you going to give it a go?
Well, I'm not.
I want to wait
because I don't know that it is. It might not be. I'm not terribly keen on starting.
What do you like with medication overall? Are you the kind of person that, if you've got a headache, you'll pop an asprin, or you're one of these types of people that have
I've never done that, but when I had a double bypass in 2004 or 2003, double bypass and all that, and 3 days on a life support machine, and after that, I had to take, like most people with heart attack, you have to take aspirin a day,
blood thinner,
small
yeah.
dose of aspirin a day, a ramipril, which controls the fluttering, the rhythm, every day, and a statin, of course, every day. That's it.
Did the statins have any side effect?
Yeah, everything has side effects.
It makes your muscles ache, doesn't it?
Yeah, not yet in my case, but you're quite right. It's one of the things on the piece of paper.
Yeah. So you've raised a huge amount of money for charity. You're known as one of the, or the greatest adventurer in a living event.
No. In 1984, the Guinness Book of Records had the thing called the World Hall of Fame, and they chose certain categories. And the world's greatest living musician was based on the number of discs they'd sold.
Okay.
And it actually at that time was Paul McCartney. The greatest sports person in the world was, guess who? 84?
In
Great,
terms of
the
gold,
greatest number of sports records in their sector.
would that be Cole Lewis?
No, it was someone called Billie Jean King.
Oh, the tennis player?
Yeah.
Billie Jean King, okay.
And
84?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I was 14 then.
And the greatest number of exploration records was me. So you can't say the world's greatest living explorer without adding Guinness Book of Records.
Okay.
Otherwise, I mean, you're the world's greatest magician, okay? Who says?
Says who, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So when you look at all the things you've done over the years, what are you the most proud of?
I think having a very happy, good working marriage for 38 years. I know you shouldn't be proud of luck, and I know that is, of course, luck, but I'm still proud of it.
And one last thing that you've spoken about before, in Oman, you found that lost city.
Yeah.
And it took you how many years? How many expeditions and how many years to find it? Is that 26, was it?
Either 25 or 26, depending on how you work it out, but say 25 years, during which we did 8 expeditions, BP, Land Rover sponsorship, a lot of cost, and Sultanate permission, digging in religious areas and so on, knowing that we had a rival, not Norwegian, but German archaeologist. They're into it in a big way. And so to get Sultanate permission rather than getting the Germans, that year, it was a lot of hard work. And after 7 not finding it, after 5 not finding it, I told Jenny I was not going to do it anymore, but she got very uppity, and we carried on. And on the 8th search, we found it through luck.
And was it down towards Salalah, or is it up in the north? Or?
Well, Salalah is on the coast, as you know. Then you've got the mountains, and then you've got the nedged gravel area. Then the dunes start going right up into the Rub al Khali. And where we found it was in the sand dunes at a place called Shissa, SHIS', which, this is nothing really to do with it back then, but I had used on army patrols because it was the last, most northerly water hole before the huge desert and the sand dunes. So militarily, I'd used that with the Land Rovers back in the 60s and so on. And it just seemed to be a sensible place to use it because there was no more water further north. Or if there was, a Bedou would only know about it in the middle of nowhere, and we'd never sort of find that sort of thing.
I'm going to Antarctica at the end of this year. What advice would you give someone who's lived in the Middle East for as long as I have and generally been around warm climates for as long as I have?
I would say it depends on what you're doing when you get there.
We're going to Mount Vinson, on Vinson Massive.
Yeah, I found Mount Vinson a really nice, gentle walk. There's not a climb. On the very last 100 meters, there's a little few boulders about, but you can skirt around them to get on the top. Very pleasant. You go at the right time of the year. The weather's not bad. It's not one of these places that's riven with storms all the time. And you might hit one, but we waited for 3 days in the advanced base camp and the cook tent for groups, tourists and that. The cook tent, they dug into the snow
Yeah.
to make out a big tub. And in the middle, they'd not dug it out. So it was a table of snow in the middle of this big stuff. So all the tourists can sit round sort of thing. And then there's this big marquee tent thing with normal tent bars, And while we were there, the wind blew it off, and some of the tourist tents, all of which were inside ice block things, you cut out an ice block quite heavy. And that night, one of the ice blocks to protect the tent inside fell off and hit this tourist on the head, and he was upset. And they didn't set out on that day. We waited 3 days, and the weather got better, and there was no problem. And then there is I think it's 2,000-foot rope, which you go up like that on your skis,
Yeah.
So slowly. And so we watched a well-known group leader with about 6 Americans going up. We were watching them through binoculars as they went up. And you could see one of them falling off and sort of coming down, bouncing sort of thing, not drop. And it turned out to be a rucksack. But all the important things for this bloke fell out of the rucksack on the way down. So that was upsetting. So that delayed us a bit. But it was easy and just very enjoyable.
So I should enjoy it then.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving me some of your time, and I really appreciate it, more than anything. And I wish you luck in Southend-on-Sea when you go there.
That's very kind. Thanks.
Nice to meet you.
Cheers. Cheers.
Well, there you have it, Sir Ranulph Fiennes, a true adventurer listed in the Guinness Book of Records of one of the greatest adventurers of all time. What a man, what a guy, what compassion he had, and to hear him understand how he used fear, to be able to do the things that he's done over the years, those crazy adventures, that wacky stuff that he's really got into, but also how he understands modern day bullying. I thought that was really interesting. Cyberbullying wouldn't have been about for Sir Ranulph when he was young, but to see how that impacts lives and the pain that it causes, but also the things that you can do to use that bullying as a force for good, I think was really, really important to learn. Look, I love you watching this show. If you want to see other episodes of the show, look, click there. Literally click there and you can see other episodes that I've filmed with other phenomenal guests. But even better, why don't you click there and subscribe? I'd really appreciate it. Just click there and subscribe, press the bell button, and every single episode will come straight to you here on YouTube so you don't miss a beat. Go on, click that one over there. Go on, please. Go on, get it done. I'll see you soon.